Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm glad you're here tonight, because what we're about to uncover is one of the most unsettling realities of narcissistic psychology. The moment they realize you're not crawling back, you're not pleading, you're not chasing, you're silent. And that silence, the very thing they underestimated, becomes the force that shatters their entire illusion of control. So let me ask you this. Do you know what happens inside a narcissist when you finally stop playing their game? In their mind, your return was a guarantee. Not a possibility, a certainty. They counted on it the same way a gambler counts on the next win. They walked away, believing you would crumble, believing their absence would break you, believing their silence would force you to chase. They thought they knew your heart so well that they could script your reaction, but they didn't consider something far more powerful. The moment you get tired of pain, you become dangerous to their ego. When the narcissist pulls away, they expect your world to collapse. It's part of the performance. They leave dramatically, but with a secret smile. To them, the discard isn't the end, it's the bait. The real show begins when they wait for your desperation to kick in. They imagine your texts, your apologies, your attempts to fix what you didn't break. They believe their absence is your punishment. They never imagine that it becomes your freedom. So when you stay silent, when you choose dignity over panic, when you choose self-respect over chasing someone who discarded you, something shifts. The narcissist's script starts to fall apart. Their ego, the same ego that predicted your return, suddenly detects a threat, not because you're gone, but because you're quiet. Silence is not passive to them. Silence is rebellion. It's disobedience, and disobedience is the one thing their ego cannot digest. You have to understand, narcissists rely on measurement. They gauge their worth through your reactions, your tears, your messages, your attempts to salvage the relationship. Your pain reassures them that they matter. Your anxiety feeds their superiority. The moment you remove those signals, they're left staring at a blank screen, unable to calculate their value, and nothing terrifies them more than emotional invisibility. This is where the haunting begins. At first, they tell themselves you're just being dramatic. They assume you're waiting for the perfect moment to reach out. They think you're bluffing, trying to make them worry. They misunderstand silence, the way a child misunderstands thunder. They think it's just noise, not a sign of a coming storm. They assume you'll break, and they keep waiting for the moment you fold. But as the hours turn into days, and days into weeks, something unexpected happens. Their confidence dips. Their certainty wavers. They check their phone more often than they'd ever admit. They stalk your social media, looking for any sign that you're hurting. They reread old messages, looking for clues that you still need them. This is the first crack in their illusion, the realization that maybe, just maybe, you aren't coming back. Your silence becomes a mirror. It forces them to confront their own insignificance, something they've spent their entire life running from. For the first time, they feel the weight of being ignored. And to someone who survives on attention the way lungs need oxygen, this is suffocating. The silence you chose to heal becomes the silence that begins their psychological unraveling. By now they've told people they'll come back. They always do. They've built their reputation on that certainty. So when your silence continues, it doesn't just threaten their ego, it threatens their image. They begin to panic in private, but they can't show it publicly, so they pretend everything is fine even as their mind spins out of control, replaying every moment where they underestimated you. And here's the real question, the one that pulls you deeper into this story. What happens to a narcissist when they realize the one thing they thought they owned, the one person they expected to always return, has vanished into silence? What happens when the game they designed becomes the trap they fall into? That's what we're going to uncover in the next chapter. Stay with me. Here's where the psychology turns darker. When the narcissist finally realizes you're not reacting, their mind goes into a state of cognitive dissonance. Two conflicting beliefs crashing into each other. One belief says you can't live without them. The other belief says you're gone. And when those two realities collide, something inside them fractures. They can't accept both, so they begin rewriting the story, just to protect their fragile identity. At first, they blame you. They tell themselves you're being childish, manipulative, dramatic. This protects the fantasy that they still have power. They can't accept that your silence is strength. so they label it as immaturity. But even as they lie to themselves, the truth leaks through the cracks. They feel the sting of losing control, and denial becomes their first line of defense against emotional collapse. Then comes the second stage, projection. They convince themselves that you must be suffering. You must be checking your phone. You must be replaying old memories. In their mind, you're pacing the floor in the dark, waiting for them to return. Projection allows them to avoid the truth, that the person suffering isn't you. It's them. They need to believe you're in pain, because it soothes the wound their ego refuses to acknowledge. But when your silence continues, when no message appears, when you don't break, the projection starts to flip. They begin to wonder, what if they're not hurting at all? What if they've moved on? And that question doesn't just sting, it terrifies them, because narcissists aren't afraid of losing love. They're afraid of losing superiority, losing relevance, losing control. Your silence challenges the very foundation of their identity. This is when they start replaying the relationship in their mind, not to heal or reflect, but to search for proof that you were still attached. They revisit arguments, moments of vulnerability, old messages where you said you'd never leave. They cling to those memories like evidence, trying to reassure themselves that the person they underestimated hasn't suddenly become stronger than their ego predicted. But as the silence grows heavier, those memories stop feeling comforting. They start to feel threatening. Suddenly, every moment where you were kind becomes a sign that you were capable of real love, something they couldn't appreciate. Every moment you forgave them becomes a reminder that they didn't deserve you. This realization ignites a cold, unfamiliar emotion inside them. Regret. Not emotional regret, but ego regret. Ego regret is different. It's not, I lost someone I loved. It's, I lost someone who made me feel powerful. Narcissists don't regret losing the person. They regret losing the supply, the validation, the emotional access. And when your silence cuts off that supply completely, they begin spiraling into a restless hunger for the control they once held so effortlessly. Now paranoia kicks in. They start imagining you with someone else, someone stronger, healthier, someone who treats you better than they ever did. And that vision isn't just painful to them, it's humiliating. Narcissists live in a hierarchy in their mind. They must always be at the top. The thought that you might have replaced them with someone more stable shatters that internal ranking system. At this stage, their behavior becomes unpredictable. They may start posting things online designed to provoke you, cryptic quotes, photos, forced happiness. Not because they're happy, but because they desperately need you to believe they're unaffected. They need you to see their performance and feel something, anything, because the worst outcome isn't that you're angry. The worst outcome is that you're indifferent. And here is the turning point that ties this chapter together. Narcissists can handle being hated. They can handle being argued with. They can handle being confronted, but they cannot handle being ignored. Silence is the one force they have no defense against. It strips them of the emotional armor they hide behind, and exposes the emptiness they desperately try to avoid. In the next chapter, we'll explore exactly how that emptiness turns into panic. This is the moment everything shifts. Your silence, calm, steady, unmoving, forces the narcissist into a psychological corner they never imagined they'd face. They thought you'd panic. They thought you'd chase. They thought losing you was impossible. But now, for the first time, they're faced with a reality where they don't get automatic access to your emotions. And that realization shakes them more than any argument ever could. At first, they try to reclaim control quietly. They check your social media, looking for signs that you're still attached. A sad quote, a lonely picture, a late-night post, anything that proves you're still orbiting them emotionally. But when they find nothing, when your online world shows zero signs of distress, their stomach drops. That's when the fear begins to bleed through the arrogance. Then comes the testing phase. A like on an old photo, a random emoji reaction, a view on your story. They're not reaching out directly. They're poking, checking, waiting for you to break the silence. If you react, even slightly, it tells them you're still under their influence. But when you maintain your distance, when there's no response, no acknowledgement, no emotional ripple, it sends them into a deeper panic. Now their narrative starts cracking. They told themselves you were weak. They told others you'd beg to come back. They believed they were irresistible, unforgettable, irreplaceable. But your silence is rewriting the story in real time. And as their delusion breaks, something inside them begins to unravel. They're not just losing you, they're losing their identity as the one who always held the power. When the panic grows unbearable, they attempt their next tactic. Indirect communication. Mutual friends suddenly hear from them. They ask questions, pretend to be casual, pretend not to care, but underneath the act, there's a trembling fear. Has this person moved on for real? They want updates. They need evidence. And every positive detail about your life feels like another blow to their ego. Then the narcissist finally cracks. They send a message, but not the one you'd expect. It won't be an apology. It won't be accountability. It'll be something vague, something emotionless, something meant to test, not to reconnect. Hey, you good? Just checking in. These messages aren't about you, they're about confirming that their control still exists. When you don't respond, the silence becomes a mirror reflecting their deepest insecurity. At this point, the narcissist experiences what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a wound to their ego so sharp that it triggers a full internal meltdown. They begin spiraling between disbelief and rage. How could you stay silent? How could you refuse to give them the emotional reaction they feel entitled to? They built their confidence on the assumption that you'd always be there. Your silence proves they were wrong. This is where the emotional unraveling becomes obvious. Their thoughts race. Their anxiety spikes. The confidence they wore like armor begins to crumble. They start replaying old conversations, searching for clues. They wonder what moment you realized your worth, and the more they think, the more the power dynamic flips. Your silence becomes the dominant force. Their obsession becomes the consequence. In desperation, some narcissists escalate. They may reach out with a longer message, pretending to be concerned or nostalgic. They may try to guilt trip you, provoke you, or bait you into reacting. But every attempt is rooted in one truth. Your silence has become their nightmare. It strips away their illusion of superiority and forces them to confront a painful reality. They need you more than you ever needed them. And that is the exact moment the narcissist breaks. Not dramatically, not loudly, internally. Quietly. It's the shattering realization that the person they believed they could control simply walked away and stayed away. This turning point is the beginning of their internal collapse, the psychological downfall that we'll explore fully in the next chapter. This is where the narcissist begins to unravel from the inside out. Your silence, once just an inconvenience, now becomes a psychological assault on everything they believe about themselves. It forces them into a terrifying confrontation with their own insignificance. And because they can't handle that truth, they start spiraling into emotional chaos, desperate to regain the control they thought they'd never lose. They try distraction first. New people, new conversations, new attention, anything to fill the growing void inside them. But none of it works. Every interaction feels hollow. Every attempt at validation falls flat. Because it's not admiration they're craving. It's control over you, and the fact that they can't access your emotions anymore feels like a wound they can't stop picking at. When distraction fails, anger rises. This anger isn't normal anger. It's the narcissistic rage that bursts out when they feel powerless. They may vent to friends, blaming you for being dramatic or holding a grudge. They twist the story to protect their ego, but beneath the bravado there's one truth. They're hurt that you didn't chase, hurt that you didn't break, hurt that you simply walked away. Now their internal collapse grows more visible. Their mood swings become violent shifts. One moment confident, the next moment anxious and uneasy. Your silence exposes something they've tried their entire life to hide. How fragile they really are. Without your emotional response, they lose the script. And without the script, their whole identity feels like it's slipping between their fingers. Next comes the blame phase. They blame you for changing. They blame life for being unfair. They blame everyone except themselves, because accountability would require self-awareness, and self-awareness would reveal the truth they fear most. You didn't stay silent because you were weak. You stayed silent because you outgrew them. That truth burns them more deeply than any insult ever could. Then the narcissist begins rewriting history. Not because they believe their new version, but because they need a story that protects their ego. Suddenly, they're the victim. They tried their best. They loved you more than you realize. They did everything they could. These illusions are their coping mechanism, fantasies built to survive the pain of no longer controlling you. But the collapse hits even harder when they start comparing you to everyone around them. No new supply feels as stable. No new connection feels as deep. No new person mirrors your empathy, your patience, your kindness. They begin to feel the loss in a way that's almost physical, because they didn't just lose a partner, they lost their emotional anchor, the person who made their life make sense. And as the collapse worsens, something terrifying happens. You become their obsession, not romantically, not lovingly, but psychologically. They start stalking your energy from a distance, checking your profiles, monitoring your life, analyzing every sign of your growth. Every achievement you make feels like a personal insult to them. Your silence becomes proof that you're thriving without them. This is the consequence they never saw coming. They expected you to beg, to shrink, to crumble. They never imagined your silence would become your revenge, effortless, quiet, devastating. Each day you don't reach out confirms what they feared most. You slipped out of their control, and with every silent day that passes, their sense of power shrinks further, leaving them emotionally exposed and deeply insecure. By this point, the narcissist is no longer angry at you. They're angry at themselves. Not consciously, of course, but deep inside, they know your silence means something they can't admit out loud. You finally saw through them, and nothing destroys a narcissist faster than being seen clearly. This collapse is only the beginning. The final chapter will reveal how your silence becomes the ultimate turning point, not just for them, but for you. Here's where everything shifts, not for the narcissist, but for you. Because there comes a moment when you finally understand that your silence wasn't just a reaction, it was a decision, a boundary, a turning point. You didn't stay quiet because you were defeated. You stayed quiet because you were done giving pieces of yourself to someone who never learned how to take care of anything real. As the narcissist searches for explanations that protect their ego, you begin seeing the truth with piercing clarity. You realize the silence that broke them is the same silence that rebuilt you. You found peace in the space where chaos used to live. You found your breath where manipulation once suffocated you. And you discovered that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Meanwhile, the narcissist still waits for an emotional reaction. Any reaction that restores the old dynamic. But that chapter of your life is closed. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with understanding. You've outgrown the version of yourself who needed to explain, justify, or defend. Your silence is simply the absence of battle. You stopped fighting because the war was won internally. And this is what truly haunts the narcissist. Not your absence, not your silence, but your evolution. They expected you to collapse without them. They expected you to remain emotionally dependent. They expected you to circle back the way countless others did. Instead, you rose, quietly, powerfully, with a steadiness they cannot comprehend, because they've never cultivated that strength within themselves. You begin to notice subtle shifts in your own life. You breathe easier. You trust yourself more. You no longer replay old conversations in your mind. Your body stops bracing for emotional impact. This internal freedom is something the narcissist will never fully understand, because they live in psychological cages built from their own fears, wounds, and delusions. The narcissist, on the other hand, begins to experience the slow, cold consequences of losing someone they thought they had permanently tethered to their ego. Their attempts to replace you fail. Their attempts to provoke you fall flat. Their attempts to rewrite the story collapse under the weight of your indifference. Your silence becomes their mirror, a reflection of everything they never fixed within themselves. But here's the deeper truth. Your silence didn't destroy them. Their own emptiness did. Your silence simply exposed it. Without the emotional fuel you once provided, they are forced to sit with the discomfort they've avoided their entire lives. And this is why they stay stuck in psychological patterns. Because growth requires reflection, and reflection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability terrifies them. You, however, move forward. You realize that the real victory wasn't in breaking the narcissist, it was in breaking free from them. Your silence was not a weapon, it was medicine, a reclaiming of emotional territory they once occupied, a declaration that your peace matters more than their chaos, and that realization becomes your new foundation. In the end, the narcissist shock wasn't about your silence, it was about discovering who you truly were once they no longer had control over your voice. They underestimated your strength because they never bothered to see the real you, but distance revealed what closeness once hid. You were always the powerful one. You were always the stable one. You were always the one capable of walking away. So here is the final truth. Your silence is not emptiness. It's closure. It's the ending of a story that never deserved your loyalty, and the beginning of a life built on authenticity, clarity, and self-respect. And while the narcissist may never admit how deeply your silence shook them, you know the truth. You didn't lose them. You freed yourself from them. And that freedom is the ending they never saw coming.